building? Maybe how long were you at Boltz? Who wants to start?
Well, first of all, you'd lie, because I wasn't here in the 70s.
Sorry.
My name's Rich Dixon, and I started at Boltz in '85. And I was here 24 years, and I taught math until Mrs. Campion kicked me out of her room. And that's true, she actually did.
My name is Liz McGrew, or Frau McGrew, if you have me for German, when I come here to sub. I taught at Boltz for about 40 years, and I taught mostly German, English, and reading. One year I taught math. He was always bothered by that, but I taught math one year, and then other things just periodically, but my primary subjects were German, English, and reading.
My name is Mike Walz. I started here in 1977 as a math teacher, and I retired in 2005. During my years, in addition to being a math teacher, I served as like Mr. Vigil did, as Dean of Students, and then assistant principal, and then I was principal for 15 years before I retired. I coached basketball early on, both girls and boys basketball, and yeah, that's it.
Questions do you all have? Go ahead.
What was your favorite class at Boltz?
Are you talking to me?
Any of
Or anybody?
Favorite class?
Oh, well, I didn't take any classes here, but the class I enjoyed teaching the most was German. It's just way too much fun. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember the fire?
Well, none of us is gonna remember the fire except what we read in the papers or the yearbook, because none of us were here for that.
Hold on just a second. Let's go a little bit slower. So, before we ask more questions, so just wait a minute. What do you guys remember hearing about the fire, or any of the news around town about it, or?
I just remember, you know, I thought the selection of the mascot was so appropriate, because I didn't know that Boltz had started building and then burned down, and it was delayed as an opening. I think it was delayed about 6 months, if I remember correctly. The students that were supposed to come here ended up going to Blevins and Lesher. And can you imagine, as a 9th grader, you were supposed to open up a school, new school, a fire happens, and now you got to go to Blevins or Lesher. But in January, they say, oh, by the way, now we're opening Boltz. So in January, can you imagine, as a 9th grader in the middle of the year, coming to a brand new school? That's what happened to those kids, from what I understand. But I thought the selection of the Phoenix, and I guess the students helped do that, was so right on, because from the ashes rose a new school.
What was the original mascot?
That was it.
The Phoenix.
From the get-go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question.
What physical changes caused the school doctor?
Oh my goodness. Well, the counseling center was where it is now. Then it moved up to that office that's kind of the attendance office. And just in the last couple of years, it moved back to where it was originally. We had no tech building, but you have to understand, we really didn't have any technology. We didn't have laptops, we didn't have really computers. There was no Google. There are others, and I think you guys can talk about.
Mrs. McGrew reminded me, as we came down the ramp, in the original building, from the counseling center, what is now the attendance, you looked into an open courtyard.
So it's where student services is now. So you know where like Miss Jones, Miss Souders, Officer Rowe, their offices. That used to be a courtyard.
There was an open
outside.
courtyard there. This technology building still back here in the back, it was a separate building. It wasn't even connected to this main building.
So like the wood shop. Like, so
The
Miss
wood
Lady's
shop was a
classroom?
separate building, And during one of the upgrades, we connected that and added on those classrooms that are down there, art, photography, and that. All of the science rooms down here, I think, were new.
Yeah.
They weren't a part of the building.
The ones on this side,
So it'd be like Wilson, Withrow, those rooms are new.
yeah. But the rooms that are right on the hallway were there then.
Right, the inside they were there, but the outside were built in about, what,
And the
90s?
reason I'm sure that there was a science room across the hall for me is that they had live animals in that room periodically. And every now and then, my classroom would be interrupted with a snake or a ferret or a rat. And the kids would scream and yell, and I'd say, somebody who's willing to pick up a snake, and one kid would be, there's his hand, and they could carry it back to the science lab.
I want to pick up on that. There are two steak stories that I remember. Dan Prebble was our science department head. He was a wonderful man. He was a football coach. He was a wrestling coach. And the kids loved him. But he loved to have animals in his classroom. He always had snakes in his classroom. He had one big boa constrictor. Two stories that I remember. One time it got up in the ceiling, and we lost it for months. I think a custodian maybe found it up in there dead later on. The second thing that I remember is he used to let the students come in and feed the boa constrictor. And he'd tell them, now, make sure you wash your hands. You don't want any scent on your hands when you feed that boa constrictor. Well, one student had touched the mouse, did not wash his hands, went to feed the boa constrictor, and the boa constrictor latched onto him. And Prebble could not pry the jaws off of that boa constrictor. About a week after that, snakes were no longer allowed at Boltz Junior High School. Poor kids.
Wait, is this
Well-
hand gone?
What?
Is this hand gone?
I'm sorry.
Is this hand gone?
I don't know what happened. I don't think the kid was seriously
No,
hurt.
his hand is still there.
Don't eat them. They don't eat them, but
It was
he
fine.
was hurt.
Yeah, that's another change. You know, Boltz wasn't a middle school. Boltz was a junior high school up until
2005, I think.
2005.
2008.
Eight? That's when you switched?
Okay. And then it became a middle school. So it was 7, 8, 9, and then it became 6, 7, 8.
So we had big ninth graders in this building. At one point in this building, we had 1,200 students. That's more than are probably at Fort Collins High School right now.
It's double what we have.
Double. Yeah.
Double what you had. We had trailers out back, modular classrooms out back, 1,200 students.
Everybody had to share a locker.
Yes.
Nobody had one of their own. So it was different. I will tell you also what is now the computer lab. For a while was an English classroom. Then it was a computer lab because the kids didn't have their own laptops. So if we wanted the kids to do something on computers, we had to actually take it to a lab there or down in the library hall down there.
You're talking about the old days.
Well, in the old days though, since we had no computers, if kids were writing a paper for a teacher, they had to handwrite it. And they were not allowed to type it because someone was afraid that maybe they'd have someone else write their paper, or if a parent were typing their paper for them, the parent might correct the errors. So all papers had to be done by hand.
In cursive?
Yep. We even taught cursive classes
Brody's like,
here.
I would be.
Can you imagine that?
No thanks.
It was
How about
pretty
if-
bad for
How
some
about
kids.
if we go back to that?
No.
They don't even know cursive. They haven't been taught.
I know cursive.
So you have a
Mr. S, we
question?
have a question over here,
Yeah,
and
oh.
Martha's gonna be
Sorry.
holding on to that paper ball and stop throwing it in the.
What electives were offered?
Well, one change I remember was when we added technology education. For a long time, it was just shop,
Wood and metal.
wood and metal shop. And maybe Mike, you can help me out, what year? Late 80s, 87, 88.
Whenever Tom Smith came on.
Yep, we had it changed from just being shop to being technology education. And that was a big deal.
Boltz, I want to piggyback on that. Boltz has always been a school that believes not only in academics, but also in music, art, choir, etc. Now I can remember,
Foreign languages.
I can remember 2 electives in PE that I'm sure aren't taught in school anymore. Jim Kibler used to teach rifle shooting in PE. They had pellet guns. It was called hunter safety. And he also used to have them shoot bow and arrows. Now I'm pretty sure that that's probably not taught in PE right now.
We just got rid of some of the old bows and arrows.
Yeah.
We also
that's
had,
party.
we also had art and music and world languages that you still have here today. So, yeah.
I have a comment. I actually saw the bow and arrows in like one of the old yearbooks. I saw kids shooting them. And I have a question. What do you feel makes Boltz special?
The staff and the kids, and for me, for the years I was here, I always felt it was like a family. Boltz community to me was a family, and that didn't mean that we all got along all the time. Some of us argued a lot. We argued a lot.
Yeah, I probably haven't come back in this building in almost 15 years, but when I walked in the building, you just walk in a building like this, you look at the signs, you look at the teachers with their shirts on. There's a lot of pride in this school, especially from the staff, and I hope that that then filters down to the students. And I would echo what Mrs. McGrew said. It's the staff, first of all. I think you gotta have excellent teachers that really care about middle school kids. And the teacher, and the kids then have to buy in to the programs.
It's about the people, it's not about the building. It's about the people. For sure.
Yeah. What's your question back there? Your hand is up with the Boltz shirt.
What do you think has changed the least about this building?
Least.
The building looks pretty much the same, although it's been upgraded, you know. The building, you can't do much to change the walls and stuff. You can't push them out or anything. It's about the original size as back when we were there. What has changed the least? I would say the teachers. I'm sure Mr. Vigil, when they go to hire teachers, they're looking for the same thing that we looked for back when we were all hired. And that is somebody who really wants to work with your age kid, okay? Now, Mr. Dixon's got a story that he's told me many times, and he wasn't real keen on coming to middle school. He wanted to go to high school, okay? Because he's an academic person. He really knows his math, okay? He could teach any level math that you want to learn. But one of our former teachers here, who happened to be working in personnel, said, we'll get you to high school eventually, but I want you to go to junior high 1 year. And what happened? He fell in love with you kids, this age kids. He fell in love with it. And same for Mr. Vigil. I think when he was hired, there were a lot of high schools wanted Mr. Vigil.
Well, and there were other schools. They didn't even, Boltz was not even a place I was supposed to come visit. Probably the same HR lady saying, hey, I got a school that I think you might like. Go check this out. The principal's name is Mike Walz. And in 5 minutes of walking this building with Mr. Walz, I knew this is what I want to be. I had a job already in Grand Junction. I had a school. I knew where my classroom was going to be. All of that, and I made the choice to come here just because of the people. Mr. Walz walking through the hallway, and he knew every single kid's name in that hallway, which is, what do I do in hallways, right? Same kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. I think the people try to stay the same, and we look for the same qualities. So.
And my answer would be the community that I said was most special. Just that even now when I come into sub, I can feel that sense of community and the other thing. But one thing that has changed a lot that I don't think very many people know, when I first started teaching, We were not allowed to have any beverage at all in our classroom. We were not allowed to have water because, you know why? They said, if you have water, then the kids will expect to be able to have water in the classroom. And I'm thinking, wouldn't that be a good thing? And yet, they didn't listen to me, didn't call my number, and it wasn't allowed for quite some time. And eventually, we could have fluid of some sort in our classroom. My two children brought coffee to Mr. Dixon every day. My daughter for 3 years, that's Miss Campion. And then my son followed. Aaron brought him coffee for those 3 years, and then he wanted to know what my third child's name was, and I didn't have a third child. But we could not drink anything in the classroom, which is not good for your bodies. I'm so glad that has changed.
Go ahead.
What was your favorite thing that has changed since you left?
Yeah, for me, it was these. I don't know if they're in the cafeteria anymore. Did you take the ones?
No, absolutely not. Those
They're
are
gone.
Still up.
We used to have
They're up.
those.
They're still up.
Oh, they're still up.
The ones
Okay,
in the
for me,
cafeteria are still up.
yeah, the kids would make these things. They'd work on them, and sometimes in groups of 2 or 3. We called them 4x4s because you take a sheet of plywood that's 4x8, you cut it in half, and mathematically now you got a 4x4. So we called those 4x4s, and Mr. Johnson, the art teacher, would have kids decide a theme, and then they would paint the picture, and those things just, I can't believe the talent that some of our kids had. So, thanks.
Do you have an answer? I think
What was
that's,
your favorite extracurricular activity?
That's a good question.
I'm sorry.
What was your favorite extracurricular activity?
I've got an answer to that.
Hey,
You did a good job. I wasn't judging.
No, I've got an
I just
answer to
think about
that that's not quite an answer to your question. My favorite thing about extracurricular activities at Boltz was that everyone was encouraged to do lots of different extracurricular activities. You weren't encouraged to be just a football player, or just a musician, or just a whatever. That for all the time I was at Boltz anyway, students were encouraged to be part of lots of different extracurricular activities. And that was supported by the coaches, by the band directors, by all the people that were involved, and I think that was a really, really positive thing for the school, for the students.
My answer to that question would be it changed all the time because it was dependent on what my students were in. If I had a lot of football players, then that was my favorite sport and I went to their games. But if I had a whole bunch of wrestlers, I went to the wrestling matches. So it varied from year to year. I can't say that across the board for all the time I was here, this was my favorite extracurricular.
So you're being selfish, in other words, it's just whatever was for you.
My favorite extracurricular activities were the band and orchestra concerts in the evening. And I loved all sports, but my favorite sport for going to watch was wrestling. We had some tremendous wrestling teams here. I think we were city champs probably 15 out of 20 years in one span. And I just thought wrestling was, I mean, they worked so hard, those kids.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Ms. Walz,
Oscar?
can you speak to your Boltz Box program that you would do with kids to help support Boltz athletics?
I forgot about Boltz Bucks. You might have to remind me.
So Mr. Walz, he was also kind of the athletic director, and at sports, he would pay kids to run the chains,
Oh,
to
okay,
roll
yeah.
out the mats, be the water boys, water girls, whoever it was. And if you did that, he would give you Boltz Bucks. And we had a school store that had some pretty good stuff in it, candy, sodas, different things like that, and you could go in and buy something with your Boltz Bucks, but you had to work for it. You didn't just hand those out for free. You had to go and do something to be part of your school. You had to do something to make your community better. You had to work towards making a difference for what we were doing here. And if you did that, he fed you well, and he paid you with Boltz bucks.
I forgot about that thing.
Okay, Oscar, your hand is up.
Oh, yeah. What was your favorite moment when teaching at Boltz? For all of you.
Well, my favorite moments were the years that I had my own children in class for German and English. And then my favorite moment was a 10-year span when I got to teach across the hall from my daughter. That was really unusual. I think that's...
I got one. How many of you guys know Mrs. Campion?
She's my math teacher.
Your
Miss
math
Campion, we're
teacher.
talking about you.
Can you guys picture Mrs. Campion as a 7th grader?
No.
I have pictures of it in my office.
Go by Mr. Vihill's office sometime and have him show you. Picture of Mrs. Campion as a 7th grader.
One of my students just said, is that the one? Is that the one?
Yeah, she told stories about you.
Yeah,
It's a true
She
story.
was,
some of them might be true.
she was the shortest kid in the building, and she couldn't reach the top shelf of her locker. And her locker partner was the same height, and we had to put one of those little plastic crates at the bottom so that she could store her stuff in a locker.
And she also had coffee stains on her shoes for most of her 7th grade year.
Maybe even 8th grade.
And I'll tell you why. It's because she was very kind. Her 7th grade year was the year that I came back to school after my injury. You guys might have noticed I'm in a wheelchair. If you didn't notice that, I'm kind of worried about you.
We actually have a yearbook over here from pre to.
And the first day of school of her 7th grade year was the first year that I was back. And this little 7th grade girl who I had never met showed up in my doorway and said, "Hi, I'm Megan McGrew, and I'm wondering if I could get you a cup of coffee." Just out of the blue. And I said, "Sure, that'd be really nice." And so she did that, and she did that every day for the next 3 years.
And
the
we're pretty
reason-
old. Do you know what did not exist back in my 7th grade year?
Starbucks.
Well, yeah, that too.
She was back in the dinosaur.
Travel mugs.
Yeah.
Travel mugs did not exist.
Yeah, so she had to use an open top mug.
No lids.
And there were 3 or 4 steps that she had to go up, and so frequently she would spill coffee. So she had coffee stains on the tops of her shoes. She was a very kind young person. So she and I have a very close connection, and so that's why I forgave her when she kicked me out of my classroom 24 years later.
You have a favorite memory, Mr. Walz?
I don't have a favorite memory of teaching. That's been so long ago, I have no memories of it.
Yeah, what's your question?
Ever had like a kid that you remember for being really big trouble?
In my classroom, none of them were big trouble. I said that because I knew how he would react, and I just wanted to show you how mean he was to me at the time. Mr. Behill, what's your question?
Well, so Mr. Walz has a short memory, but one of my favorite memories that Mr. Walz would do most impact me was Mr. Walz used to do a reading club 2 to 3 days out of the week. And it was when I think the Harry Potter books were really big. But man, you had to show up to his class. You had to show up after school and read that book and participate in that reading. And for the kids that made it through and went through that program, he would take them all to the movie theater over at the mall, buy them popcorn, sodas, and those kids watching their faces walk out of the building knowing that they had read that book, that they had earned that ability to go to watch that movie with Mr. Walz was pretty amazing and impactful for me as a very young teacher 21 years ago.
And I'm a Harry Potter nut. Okay, I've read the books and listened to the tapes and watched the movies probably 4 or 5 times. I enjoyed those probably more than the kids did. But why? Because of the Phoenix, because of Fox. I mean, the connection with Boltz Junior High School.
We had some teachers that went to Sam's Club last year to get some popsicles or something, and just a random person in the community overheard them that they were buying popsicles for Boltz, and he said, I just want to let you guys know that Boltz changed my life. And he paid for the popsicles, and it turns out that he owns Me Oh My, the pie store up in the court, and he donated pies to us for Pie Day, and I mean, he's probably the result of when you all were in the building. And so I just thought you should know that story.
I want to go back. Somebody asked a question about a bad kid. I run into so many of our former students. I work at a golf course, and some of them come out there, and I see them all over. And every kid that I ever run into says, was I your worst kid? And I can't even remember who they were, you know? It's like, no, you weren't the worst kid. Each kid thinks they were so bad at this age. And many of those kids that thought they were bad are now, like you say, owners of shops and doing great things out in the community. I'm sure we've got some students that probably ended up in jail. I haven't met them, but most of the Boltz students that I run into, doctors, lawyers, very successful people out in our community. There's a hand.
How many kids were at Boltz back when you were teaching?
Most of the years, Boltz was built for 750 kids. That's all we were ever supposed to have, 750, 725. That's what the building was built for. We fluctuated between 750 and 1,200 until Preston opened and Weber opened.
I actually have a comment. When I was in 6th grade, I went to, I forgot what it was called, but I was wearing a Boltz shirt, and this woman came up to me and she said, I went to Boltz when I was your age and everything.
That's cool. That's cool.
Way in the back there.
So, how are the clubs, changed?
Clubs?
It's a good question, because I don't know what clubs exist here at Boltz now. I asked the young man a little while ago, is there a chess club? Yes.
They actually just started one.
Good, yeah. In general, if a kid wanted to have a club at Boltz Junior High, all they had to do was get a teacher to sponsor it, and we generally would say, let's go. So I'm sure some of them have come, left, stuck around. I don't know. I don't even remember some of the clubs, to be true with you.
There's one. You.
Oh, okay. How long have you been teaching for?
Not as long as Mrs. McGrew. God love her, 40 years. That is awesome.
Just look at it so you can tell.
Yeah. I taught a total of 34 years, 28 here at Boltz, and then another, actually 7 more different places.
I taught 35 altogether, 24 years.
I taught 46 years, 4 years in California on a Navy base during the Vietnam War. And some of my students' dads came back who were POWs in that time. Then I taught at Napoleon Dynamite's high school for 2 years, and then I came here. And this is probably the best place I've been.
Without a doubt. I came from Puerto Rico. The people of Puerto Rico are hurting right now from their second hurricane in like 8 years. I love the people of Puerto Rico. I love the island. But I was teaching down there at a government military base. I was teaching K-12 students that were dependents of military.
Yeah.
How
many employee of the months did you guys get?
That's cool. Me? Never. I was never.
Just all of you though.
Well, we did have something for a period of time, and it started with the drama teacher, and it was a special chair, really comfortable. You could lean back, you could twirl, all of this and that. And for each week, the kids voted on a teacher so that most of us got to have the chair in our classroom. But she told me when I won the chair that week, that the student says, why would we give her a chair? She never sits down. Because I didn't. I stand up when I teach. I don't ever remember sitting down. So that's the only thing I can tell you we did as far as Teacher of the Year. There were special awards like the MESA, which was a math, engineering, science teacher award. There have been other awards, but nothing as special as I think you're asking about.
Well, just one last little comment, because school's going to be out in a few minutes. What would be your message to these guys, our future leaders, students of Boltz? Parting message or hopes for them?
You never know where you're going to end up. Some of you right here might end up teaching at Boltz one of these days. You never know what path you're going to follow. You never know. So keep the doors open and follow your heart. If you get it, end up working with kids like yourself, you'll make a difference.
If you've ever read the poem by Robert Frost, The Road Less Taken, one of my, less traveled, okay, but it's one of my favorite poems, and I read on a poster, so this is not my own thinking, take the road less traveled, it's far less congested. Meaning, so many people do one thing, and it might not be the right choice for you. Take the one that is the right choice for you. Right now, you're in X grade level. You're never going to be able to go back to this grade level again and change what happens this year. You can only change what happens in your future. So take the road less traveled.
One more question.
How many periods did you guys have?
We vary between 7 and 8.
Yep.
I would never do
Wait,
that.
how long were they then? Like,
55 minutes.
When we, yeah.
Yeah.
50 or
And
60 minutes.
Then we went to 4, we went to blocks.
What if we used to have 2 times periods in a day? That's res.
all right, well, thank you so much for coming in. Can we give our guest speakers a